Welcome to this episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. This is the podcast where we dig deep into the profits and the cash flow leaks in your home service business. We're so glad you could join us. Our guest today is Steve Juetten, and I hope I said that right. Close enough? Okay, we're going to keep rolling then. And I am so glad that he was able to join us. So let me tell you a little bit about Steve. Steve is an exit wizard, and I love that term, an exit wizard for small to medium-sized business owners. He is the secret sauce to supercharge effective and profitable business exits through careful planning and nimble execution. Drawing from the lessons he's learned in the sale of his own financial advisor practice, Steve is a go-to collaborator to his fellow entrepreneurs looking to win on the way out. Steve possesses exceptional mediation and facilitation skills, excelling in interest-based negotiation to orchestrate win-win scenarios for all parties. Steve, welcome to our program today.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you for the nice introduction. I'm excited to be here, and let's have a good conversation today. What do you say?
You bet. This is a topic that I hear quite often from my own clients, is the topic of how and when do you exit? I don't know when's the best time. I certainly don't know how to do it. My friend went out in the saddle. Don't want to do it that way.
No.
Because that causes hardship on the family and whoever's left behind. My other friend sold his business, but probably could have got way more for it because he sold too soon. When do I do this? How do I do this? I want to do it right. I got one shot at it. I want to do it right.
Good. Yes. Well, where would you like to dig in?
I'll let you pick. Which one of those threads do you want to pull?
Well, the first thread is often, when is the right time to sell? How do I know when it's a good time to go? And the short answer is when your revenues and your profits are increasing, particularly when your profits are increasing. So businesses have this normal arc, right? And they grow, and their profits are growing, and eventually you want to sell on the upswing. And here's the rationale. Because anybody that's going to acquire your business is going to take that as a positive sign. So most business buyers want to buy a company on the upswing. And you never know when that exactly is. But the number one mistake people make when they're trying to time it is waiting too long. I rarely see people that sell too soon, although you can do that because they're in a hurry, or in some cases there may be a good reason for it. But the real problem is waiting too long when revenues have started to go down and perhaps the owner started to lose interest in the business. And that's not the time. The time to do it is on the upswing, towards the top.
And I wholeheartedly agree, because I've seen them wait too long. They're burnt out. They're tired. They don't have the energy. Maybe they're getting up in age and they just don't have the energy to push that they used to have. And now they're trying to sell their business.
Yes.
And it's not going well for them.
No, and you said something that I want to jump in on as well. The two biggest challenges in selling a business, the two biggest challenges are the emotional toll it takes when you're trying to sell a business. Mm-hmm. And the other part is trying to run a business at the same time you're trying to sell a business.
That's hard.
It's very difficult to do. And so you've got to have the energy in order to be able to do that. And if you wait too long, just as you said, your energy is starting to wane, maybe your interest is starting to wane, and you think, oh, I can't keep doing this, right? That's too late, because it's not an easy thing to do. A mistake some business owners make is trying to sell right away because they're just exhausted and they just want to get out. And that's not fair to their customers or their clients. It's not fair to themselves either. And so the one thing I ask anybody that I talk to is let's have a plan. Okay. And the plan includes trying to peak at the right time. And that will help in a number of ways. One, you will maximize value. Two, it will be a win on the way out for everybody. And three, you don't have to be worn out. You don't have to go to the end of the rope. You can do it while you're still feeling good. So I like to have clients start early enough that we can accomplish all of that.
I had a client a couple of years ago sold their business and they were in their, oh, probably high 60s, low 70s.
Mm.
They had just been pushing this ball. It was just sluggish for them the last few years. And they tried for several years to sell and finally end up selling for pennies on the dollar value of their equipment. And they
Wow.
walked away. They were
Ouch.
done. Emotionally, physically, mentally, they were done. And I thought, how sad that this business sold at yard sale prices.
And very sad. And surprisingly, maybe you've heard this statistic, that somewhere around 70 to 80% of businesses where the owner wants to sell never sell. They
Okay.
just kind of throw in the towel and liquidate, which is what we call that.
Oh,
It's not
wow.
really selling, that's
No,
liquidating.
yep.
And the partly the reason is that people don't know how to do it and they wait too long and they get worn out and they just say, I'm done, I'm out, tap out.
And that's definitely what happened to this client. They were just beyond tired and they just got to be too much, which
Right.
now left all their employees unemployed or underemployed and their customers, that ripple goes out a long ways
Yes.
of people
Yes.
that are affected by it.
Yes, it is this pebble in a pond. And depending on the kind of business you have, whether you're a solopreneur or you have a team, there are other people that are involved and you have an impact on them. And I call this winning on the way out, where you take into account all of your stakeholders, your team, the buyer, yourself, even your vendors, even people that you lean on. You want to do this in a way where everybody's a winner. And that'll leave everybody feeling good, especially the seller, especially the business owner. And again, I just to go back to it, but it takes time to do that.
Mhm.
And one of the questions you asked was, um, how, how long does it take to sell a business? And you can do it quickly, but you're going to trade off optimum value for that. It is much better to spend longer to sell the business and be prepared to do it and to line up all your ducks in a row, right? To be ready. And it's much better to do it that way. And that just takes more time. And yet there are people that because of health or disability or whatever, they need to do it in a hurry. And we can do that as well, but recognize there's a trade-off between time and optimizing the value.
So if I'm hearing you right, you're saying that there is a plan that could be followed or maybe should be followed for an optimal sale?
Yes, nice lead in. Thank you. Yeah. So to make it simple here, there are 5 steps to selling a business. Okay. And the first one is to set your goals. What are you trying to accomplish here? And that means what kind of an owner are you, excuse me, what kind of a buyer do you want to sell your business to? What is your ideal date? What do you think you need to get out of the business? And so that planning around that is step 1, is setting goals. Step 2 is assessment. And the best way that I can describe that is, let's assume you were going to sell a house. Most people have sold a house, so they have an idea. But when you get ready to sell your house, the seller's agent will typically come in and say, do this, fix that, don't do that. As an example, they will tell you, okay, you need to fix up the kitchen, but don't replace the carpet in the 3rd bedroom. And that assessment is an essential step, because from the eyes of a buyer, and that's a key, in the eyes of a buyer, you want to enhance the value of the business. And just like selling a house, it kind of doesn't matter what you think. It matters what the buyer thinks. So the second step is assess. The third step is improve. And again, it's like selling a house. You're going to improve the things that matter to a buyer and ignore the things that don't. Just because I don't like the tile in the downstairs bathroom, the buyer doesn't care. The buyer cares about is the kitchen and the master bath and all that. So that's the third step. The fourth step is to network. And that means start trying to find potential buyers. And then the fifth step is the actual sale process, going through due diligence and negotiation and the legal compliance kinds of things. So our approach is really those 5 simple steps. And I'll just say them again. It's set goals, if you can anyway, assess. And sometimes you may need help from the outside to do that, but to assess, improve, network to find potential buyers, and then finally the sales process. Those 5 steps And I can sell any business. I can guide any owner to sell a business if we just do those 5 things. And it's interesting because I talk to people they have a technology business, or they have a home-based service business, or they're an online marketer, or whatever. One of my clients is a woman that owns a business where they do basically geological surveys for potential sites for new businesses, right? Really the nuts and bolts of the dirt. They're just looking at dirt. That's all they have. And then I have another client who is a financial advisor, and this guy never gets his hands dirty. But we follow the same process along that line, and it's all under the category of let's plan, and that will get us through there. And the more time you have to do that, the better you can do each of those steps.
So about how long does it normally take to get through all 5 of those steps?
And that's the third question I usually get from somebody. We'll get back to the first question, but
Okay.
that's usually the third question. How long does it take?
Mhm.
And the answer is it depends on your goals. And I'll go back to this again. Look, if you're a business owner, you are just done, or you have health problems or something, it can be done in 6 to 9 months. If you want to take a more planful approach to go through those steps, then it's going to be a couple of years. And the reason I say it depends is it also depends on who your buyer is going to be. And let me give you an example. If you're selling your business to maybe key people that work in your group, you're selling it to somebody within the company already, they may not be ready. And so it may take us longer to get them ready. And we call that succession planning, right?
Mhm.
So it's done internally. But it just depends. But it's typically the shortest is about 9 months. And I'm working with clients that are 5 years out, believe it or not. And so it just depends on where we're engaged with them, but typically 2 to 3 years, if I had to say it. So I hope that doesn't discourage any of the people that are listening to it. It can be done sooner, but you're going to trade off dollars for time, and that's a key.
I know from my end, during that time period leading up to them deciding they want to sell their business, we're trying to help them optimize their profits, get that cash flow where it needs to be, get some of the debt paid down,
Right.
doing that staging piece that kind of tends to happen with the business so that they've got a nice, pretty baby they can show to somebody.
Yes. We're getting the house ready to go, right? And if we
Yes.
need to put a roof on it, or we need to fix the broken steps or something, and we're probably both about on the same point. So if somebody comes to you and says, I'm finally starting to think about selling my business, you're going to focus on getting it ready to go. You're
For
going
a
to
couple
enhance the
years sometimes.
profitability and pay down debt.
Right.
And
Yeah.
I would work in lockstep with you in that regard, because I'm going to have probably many of the same thoughts you're going to have. But there are some other things that need to be done in the house besides the financial part of it. There's some things that need to be done along that line.
Well, a lot of times we find they don't have any documented procedures. And that's
Exactly
a
right.
big one. Their team can't operate under if once this brain is out of the building, how's your team going to operate? And so making sure that they start documenting policies and procedures. And if they don't have them, let's create them and get them to the point where they've got something that somebody else could step in and use. And I use the example of a McDonald's or any fast food chain. They've got such documented policies and procedures that you or I could step in, pick up the whatever they've got, whether it's a book or whatever format it's in, and we could take off and run, knowing nothing about the industry. But you want to make your own business similar to that.
Exactly.
Somebody can step in and take off and roll.
That's exactly right. I want to echo 2 things that you said there. One is there are 5 reasons that businesses don't sell in general. And item 1 is a lack of books and records. And I'm
Oh,
not just
wow.
in systems. I'm not just talking about accounting things either.
Mhm.
I'm talking about documents around systems and processes, also the other kinds of documents that are required. And I'm always amazed at how often I go in and talk to a company and the person says, well, it's all right up in here. That doesn't do us any good.
Not at all. No. Time for some brain surgery. We got to let it out.
Yeah. So one of the ways that we talk about the business being all with the owner is we call can they pass the vacation test? And
Right.
that means can you go on a 3-week vacation and not use your cell phone and not check in? And can the business still run? If you can't do that, you're not ready to sell. Because in essence, a buyer is going to look at that and say, how is this thing going to work if Bob or Susie or Tom or Sally isn't here? And every time I ask a business owner that, I get this look, oh yeah, I go on vacation all the time. And then I say, well, how many times did you check in? Well, I do that daily, sometimes 2 or 3 times. No, 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 no. That doesn't count. The vacation rule says you have to be gone for 3 weeks and not contact anybody. And if the business can still run, then you're in pretty good shape.
And I would echo that. If you look right behind me, you see the book Clockwork right behind me.
Mhm.
And that's a Mike Michalowicz book. And that's his whole thing. He goes for 4 weeks.
Oh.
If you can get out of there for 4 weeks and be totally unplugged, you've got a business that is sellable because you've got your systems and everything in place. It can run without you. You've pulled it out of your head and you've put it into the hands of the people who need to have it.
Yeah, I will start using the 4-week rule now, I guess.
Because
Same
4 weeks
message.
that's a long time to be unplugged from your business.
Right. And it's difficult emotionally, and I get that. But if you really want to know, is your business ready to sell? That's one of the items, is you can test it that way. And if it isn't, then you have some work to do to get it ready to sell.
Right. Yes.
So let's see. I wanted to go back and mention the reasons that a business doesn't sell, and
Okay.
this will give people an idea of the kinds of things you need to be doing. Well, number one is you need to have showing a steady pattern, a growth pattern, and that means increasing profitability. Because when a buyer comes in, they're going to ask for all of your financials, and you need to have that. You need to show that increasing growth. And if you don't, if it's just flat, that's okay, but you're going to get less of a value for it because a potential buyer wants to see the potential future. And they can see that by whether or not the business is growing. I was talking to a woman last week. She has an HR kind of a consulting firm. She's sort of an outsourced HR person. And we were having a good conversation. I said, so what have your revenues looked like? And she said, oh, after COVID, we've kind of been flat. And I kind of didn't say anything. And she said, so that's not good, is it? I said, no, you really have to show that growth potential. So that's rule one. Rule two is good books and records. That's all there is to it. Just like we were talking about earlier, you have to document the processes and have all that out of your head and on paper or in a book or whatever. And the third reason that businesses don't, what's that?
Can I interrupt you a second?
Sure, of course.
In your books and records, how many years of financial statements should they have?
That's a great question. You're better equipped to answer that than I am, but I can tell you from the buyers that I talk to, I want to see at least 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah. What do you say? What do you tell people?
I tell my people at least 3 because sometimes we can't get to 5, but if we can get to 3 years of clean books and 3 years of books that make sense. Because a lot of times when I first pull somebody in or bring them into one of my coaching programs or whatever, their chart of accounts is kind of just a mishmash of stuff. And we try to get it cleaned up and get the cost of goods sold up where it belongs and the overhead expenses down where they belong so that we can get a strong, what is your gross profit? What is your net profit? And then start working on building and increasing. So I wasn't sure if 3 years was about what a buyer's looking for.
Yes, for all the reasons that you said, and not to diminish it, but COVID kind of threw everything up in the air because so we're in 2024, but you really only have about 3 years of normal operations, right? And so I always tell my clients, look, shoot for 3 years just for the reason that you said. I would rather have 3 good quality years where the chart of accounts and the balance sheet and the P&L and all that are done correctly by a competent person. And that will help. Most buyers will be okay with that.
Okay.
So one of the things I wanted to mention to you, and you've run across this, I'm sure, is that many owners have an unrealistic expectation of the value of their business.
No way.
Never happens.
Never has happened. Never.
And that will turn off a buyer faster than anything. And so there are 3 ways to value a business. There is the income approach, there is the asset approach, And then there's a market approach. And to value a business, you really look at all of those. Again, income, asset, and the market approach. So early on in that planning process, we're going to want to establish a ballpark figure that is realistic. Now, in most sales of businesses, we're going to have a proper business valuation done by an independent outside valuation expert. Most buyers will demand that. But in order to start the process, I would urge anybody who's thinking about selling their business to see if they can't get an idea of what the business is worth. And that will help manage that unrealistic expectations. And just like the house analogy, all right, anybody that is selling a house thinks that they're selling a castle, and anybody that's buying a house thinks that they're buying a hovel. And that mindset has got to be in place. And if we can't bridge that gap between the price of a castle and the price of a hovel, you'll never sell your business. And so one of the things I would tell you and anybody that's a business owner is get a realistic idea of what the business is truly worth. And there's a couple of ways to do that. Even just go out and find other businesses like yours that have sold and see what the valuation was. Was it 1 times revenue, 2 times revenue, whatever the number was.
Is
But
there
start.
some,
What's
is
that?
there some place that somebody could go look and see what other business have sold for?
It's a great question, and it depends on the industry. All right. So most industry groups have that kind of data. So if you're a member of the whatever professional organization you are or professional association, they will many times have that data.
Okay.
The other thing is that for people that have been in their space for very long, they're going to know people that have sold their business, and you can reach out to them. And even if they have a non-compete or a non-disclosure agreement, they will give you an idea of what the business sold for you. They don't have to tell you the specific numbers, but you need to get some idea. And last but not least, and I'm not trying to promote this, they can always call me, and I can do evaluation just by looking at the data that they have available. We have enough industry experience, and we have enough experience in selling and valuing businesses that we can come up with a pretty close number. They can ask you. I would guess, Diane, that you would be able to come up with a pretty realistic number as well. You just need to get something from an outside source that is not you, because we all think our businesses are beautiful and wonderful, or we don't think they're worth anything at all. And neither is usually right. But it's something I would recommend. And don't go to a business broker. I will just tell you this now.
Okay.
Business
That's
brokers.
good to know.
Business brokers will tell you whatever they think you want to hear in order to get the business. Now,
Really?
there are good business brokers. Don't get me wrong. I'm not throwing them all out. But 9 times out of 10, a broker is going to tell you whatever they think you want to hear. I had a client that one time went to a business broker and said, well, what do you think my business is worth? And the broker said, well, what do you think it's worth? And well, now we've accomplished nothing. So you have to be careful about that. But I just caution, on occasion, I'll run across an owner that has a pretty realistic idea, but in general, most businesses don't really know what it is that they're worth. Most business owners don't have an idea because they've never valued their business the way a buyer would value it. So let's see. One of the things that you asked me is, what's the hardest part of selling a business? And I mentioned this earlier. It's really hard to run a business and sell a business. And I'm sure you've run across clients that are the same way, right? That they're trying to run a business and sell it. And it's a difficult balancing act, I guess is the best way to say that.
No, you bet, because you can't let your foot off on the gas on the business.
Right.
And still you're trying to put your best foot forward out there to sell the business, but you don't want the whole world knowing that your business is for sale.
Yeah, and finding that middle ground so that doesn't happen, so that you can be confidential and still pursue. That's an art. There is no, but there are ways that you can disguise your business if you're talking about it or you're listing it on one of the online sites or something. But it is a challenge. And just as you said, I love that analogy. You can't take your foot off the gas pedal, right? You can't stop growing the business and servicing the clients and all the other kinds of things that you need to do. it's a challenge. And again, that goes back to the planning purpose of it. If you can be out in front of this and have a good plan, that's one of the items that you will have to check off the list. How are we going to keep this thing going at the same time I'm trying to sell it? And it's a challenge, but there are ways around it.
So I have a good question for you. What if somebody has listed their business with a business broker, not getting a lot of hits or anything on it? Can they get out of that contract and work with somebody like you?
It's a great question. And the short answer is it depends on what agreement they signed. Most
Okay.
business brokers are going to ask for an exclusive.
Uh-huh.
And if you're going to use a business broker, what I tell people is make sure that the listing exclusive is for a very short period of time. But if they're already in one and they aren't getting many hits, they can talk with me because I'm not a broker. I'm a coach. I'm a guide.
Okay.
And so that there won't be anything that we won't be in conflict, but
Okay.
they're still going to be obligated to the
Mhm.
broker until the agreement runs out.
Okay.
And the state rules apply as well. But in general, the broker is going to have an exclusive listing for as long as that listing is in effect.
I
Sorry.
have one of my clients that's in that situation right now. He's been with this broker for 2, maybe 3 years now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And I'm thinking, I don't think he's gotten any decent hits at all. And how much, I don't know how long of a term he signed, but I'm thinking, could we get him out of that somehow, some way?
It would be a great thing to do. Might be worth even having an attorney, a business attorney, look at the agreement just to make sure. But
Mhm.
for sure, I tell people that want to use a business broker, 90 days.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah. Because if they aren't getting activity in 90 days, they aren't worth anything.
I had
Because,
another one who paid a big fee to a larger broker firm, paid him, I don't know, $40,000 up front to try to sell this business. And 5 years, 6 years later, they're out of contract with him. They just lost that money. And it's like, oh,
I'm so
that
sad.
was hard. Yeah.
It's so sad. And this is why I pick on brokers, is that those two examples are rare, but I do hear those stories. I've never heard anybody go 5 years. I've heard 2 or 3 years.
Right. And I don't know how long his contract was. I just know we're probably 5 years past it because it was pre-COVID when
Oh my
they signed
goodness.
the agreement originally. So they're probably been out of the contract for a while. But I just had to talk with him recently. It's like, yeah, no, there's nothing on the horizon. So he goes, well, I guess we just keep going.
Well, and so this is one where you and I would have a conversation and say, the business is probably not ready to sell. And you and I would want to look at it and do the assessment. What are the strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats? What are their financials look like? If they're working with you, their financials information, I'm sure, is fine. But what's preventing that? It might even be unrealistic expectations about the
Right.
price. They may say, I have to get 5 million
Right.
and the business is only worth 2. Well, you're not going to get anybody that knows anything about their niche. If you're asking for 5 and I look at it and I say it's worth 2, that gap is going to be too much.
Too big. Yeah.
Too big. So in that case, this is you and me and the grand piano that I have sitting over in the corner. This is one where you would want to look at the business and see what's going on with it from the eyes of a buyer. And that's the number one thing I tell people. Look at your business from the eyes of a buyer. And if you can't do it, then get Diane to do it or get Steve to do it or some way, because it doesn't matter what you and I, if I'm the owner, it doesn't matter what I think. A house is only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. I'm sure you've heard that. And
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
same situation. It's only worth what somebody's willing to pay for it. And if it hasn't sold in that time frame, something's going on.
Mm-hmm.
What else? What else can we talk about?
Ooh,
Okay.
just think some of the other things I've seen. Go ahead if you've got another one for us.
Well, one of them is I wanted to talk about, if you don't mind, the 4 and sometimes 5 potential buyers for a business. And we touched on that a little bit earlier. So number 1 is a succession plan. Do you have somebody in the business that can take it over? And that is the optimum, to be honest, because it causes the least disruption with your customers and your clients. So if you've got a team and you can do a succession plan, that is almost inevitably the best for everybody that is concerned because it stays in-house and your customers are happiest. And they, the messaging is, okay, I've done my time and I'm delighted with everybody else, but I have trained Judy or Bob or somebody to do it. And customers are going to say, what does it mean to me? If it means to them that nothing's going to change, then they're happy.
Yep.
So first, succession planning. Second is what I call mergers and acquisitions. And if you have a service-based business, you're a contractor or you're a painter or you're something in that arena, if you can find another business to merge your business into, that is sometimes the easiest transition other than succession planning, because you stay with the business. Now you aren't responsible for the P&L anymore, and you're going to get paid out over a period of time. But again, to the customers, it is the least disruptive. From the buyer's perspective, they love that because they're getting all the goodwill, not in the accounting terms, but they're getting all the goodwill and all the customer loyalty and everything. And that's, so think about it. If you're going to buy a business, you want that. That's the part that you want. You want those ongoing relationships. You want the customer base and the mailing list and all that kind of things. If you don't want to do that, then the third one is to simply sell the business to a third party. And that's usually my third choice. And that has pluses and minuses and pros and cons to it. And it's not an easy transition because as soon as you are no longer in the business, your customers are now shaky. And so sometimes it's hard to hang on to them. And lastly, there is, as you mentioned this, there's the liquidation approach, which is we simply sell all of the tangible and intangible assets, and we break up the company and do that. The least favorite of all of these is that last one. If we can look at those first three, succession plan, mergers and acquisitions, sell to an outside competitor usually, but to somebody that wants the business, those are much better than liquidate. Liquidations, to use your term, pennies on the dollar. Pennies on the dollar. And usually you're not looking after your customers either.
No.
And
or your team. It's
or your team
situation.
And so it's hard for all of them. And if you want to create this winning on the way out approach, which we advocate, it leaves them in the lurch, and you probably are going to be unhappy going forward. One of the questions that I get, can I go to one more thing?
You bet.
So my mentor of many years told me this, and I didn't quite understand it, but he said, the price is the price. It's the terms and conditions that are negotiable. And this is where what that means is that most business owners envision that somebody's going to write them a check for the value of their business. That's rarely done anymore. Mostly there may be a down payment, but then there is some sort of an earnout afterwards or a performance afterwards. And that detail of how you get paid over what period of time is essential to have an understanding and negotiate it well. One of my clients had an earnout that was 7 years. And so,
oh no.
and that's a really long time to be relying on the company that acquired you to be doing a good job. And as it turned out, that company didn't keep their promises to my client. So his earnout was only about 2/3 of what he thought it was going to be. And over 7 years is a really long time. Another client of mine said, I will take whatever I can get up front, and I don't care about an earnout. So again, he only took about 2/3, I would say, of what he could have gotten if he would have just been willing to negotiate a little bit on the terms and conditions. But he was adamant. He didn't want to have anything to do with the business going forward, and he didn't want to be beholden to the buyer at all. So he took less money.
So can I tell you a horror story?
Oh, I love those.
It's mine. I had an accounting firm down in California. I sold out to a CPA who had moved into town. I had to stay with him for 3 years, which I did. Over the course of that 3 years, he was so rude and so arrogant that he lost almost all my clients, and I never got another penny other than the down payment. And the clients were just mortified that he would treat them this way, because I'm a pretty hands-on, caring person, and my clients know it. And they would come to me out after hours and say, this is what my meeting with him was like. Can you do anything about it? It's like, no, my hands are tied. Consequently, when I moved to Idaho, came home to Idaho, they sought me out. Will you take us back now? Yeah, I'm outside of the jurisdiction, you bet. And I still have some of them as clients 30 years later.
That is a sad story.
That's a
And
terrible story because I only got my down payment. I didn't get the rest because of the way he treated them.
that's the part. When I sold my business, similar story. I had an offer for somebody that wasn't going to give me any money up front, and it was all earnout.
Oh no.
And now, okay, I was a financial advisor, so I'm pretty good with the financial numbers. And I've worked with a number of people, a number of my clients have sold their businesses. I laughed out loud at the principal. And I was flabbergasted. I said, why would I ever do that? Because when you have an earnout, you lose control, right? You had no control over this person who is not good and everything else. It leads me to something, and this is, if you could do it over again, what would you do, Diane?
I would never have sold to him. I would have kept my business and serviced them from Idaho. Because we started a FedEx program. FedEx loved us back then because that was pre-internet. And FedEx packages showed up at my house and I would do the work and they were happy. They didn't care. The few that I was able to bring with me to Idaho, I would have done something other than let him treat my clients the way he treated them.
Okay, you and I are going to have to work together. I can see this. So one of the things that I tell my business owners is when you do due diligence, okay, so the process is you've done the plan and you've fixed up your business and you found a buyer and you've entered into a confidentiality period. Well, the next thing that happens is you have a memorandum of understanding that says that outlines this is what we're going to do. Then the due diligence starts. And what I tell my clients is that due diligence is a two-way street.
Two-way, and I didn't dig deep enough.
And there you go. And
yeah.
So among other things, if you had done deeper, and I'm not throwing stones because
no, go ahead. I learned a big lesson there.
you learned. But this is the value of having a Diane or a Steve who has done this before. Most business owners have never sold a business. Most buyers have bought multiple businesses. So the field's not even, right? And if you get good guidance from Diane or Steve or whoever it is that's helping you, usually not a broker, you will avoid some of those critical errors. And the due diligence one is the one that I see most often fails stories, is not looking carefully enough at the buyer. And the due diligence is a two-way street. They're going to want to know all the details of your business, and you need to be prepared to share that. But the other part of it is you need to have, as the owner, as the seller, you need to dig deep enough. And I would bet, okay, here's my ad for Diane. If anybody wants to sell their business and they're at the stage where they're doing due diligence, you ought to talk to Diane, because I'll bet you're really good at it now, right?
Oh, I would not let that happen to somebody now. I was young and dumb and wanted to come home to Idaho and didn't realize that FedEx would have allowed me to keep my business. And
yeah, and you would, and even if you had wanted to sell the business, you probably would have chosen a different buyer based on your due diligence. And here's an example. I have my clients asked to talk to a number of the buyer's clients or customers.
Ooh, that's a good one.
And if the buyer says, I don't want you to do that, that's a red flag. That's not a yellow flag. That's a red flag. And so, but a buyer that is upfront and that is good at this will say, oh, absolutely. My best customers are my best salespeople. They'll tell you all about how great we are and blah, blah, blah. And if they have a team, I also ask my clients to talk to their team, because you'll get a sense of what it's like to work with this person. So that's part of the due diligence. You need to make sure they have the money and that they're funding it correctly. 2, you really want to talk to their team. And 3, you really want to talk to their clients. And there's a little tip. If anybody's interested in selling the business, talk to the customers, because they will tell you the truth. And if the buyer says you can't, walk away or run away, as the case may be.
Steve, this has been a great interview. Thank you so much for coming and sharing this wisdom with us.
I am delighted. Thank you. It's been a wonderful conversation. I'd love to come back and talk more if you feel a need or if people have specific questions. Let's have another conversation, Diane. I'm always
You
happy to
bet.
talk about this. It's my
Yeah.
favorite subject, as you can tell.
Well, this is such an important subject. Like you and I were talking offline, you get one shot at selling your business.
Yeah.
And let's do it well. Let's exit well. So it's a win-win for everybody. And you don't have the experience like I did, where I got screwed so badly from that other accountant. And not only me, but my clients were hurt by it. And it ended up being a lose-lose. And so we don't want that situation for somebody. That
No.
was awful to live through that. And
Yes,
know
and
that I was bound to him for 3 years. That was dumb. But I didn't know it back then. I was too young. So a little more seasoned now.
well, good for you, and it is so important. And I'll just mention this to you, and anytime you want to have a chat about it, let me know, because we're really trying to be of service here to the business owners and to protect them, because again, it's not a level playing field. They're usually talking to somebody that's bought a business before. And if you've never sold a business, you don't know the traps and the things that can trip you up and everything else. And if you and I can work with your clients and just help them avoid any of those trips and traps, then it's well done. Then it's good for them. And we want them to be taken care of and taking care of their team and taking care of their clients and customers. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, so before we wrap this up, I got to get my zinger question in there. I need to know from the different businesses you've worked with, a hidden profit leak that you have found that when somebody's trying to sell their business.
Yeah, this is easy. It's the lack of documenting processes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's that we were talking about the 4-week rule. So many businesses have it all up here, the business owner. We need to get it down on paper. That's the one that will make buyers run away, because they'll see that when the business owner walks away, well, I'm not going to value the business as highly as I need to, because I don't know if it's going to work when you're not here. So the profit leak is not documenting processes and systems and even the basic things, not even having good documentation from a tax or accounting standpoint. So get your documents in order.
That was a great plug for me. Thank you.
I didn't mean to. That it's something I would say to everybody else, but I'm glad it's a plug for you. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Steve, if people want to get in touch with you and learn more about what you have to offer, where can they go?
Sure. The easiest way is to call me, and 425-829-5953 for Get Acquainted call. Or you can go to my website, which is bridgegatepartners.com. So bridgegatepartners.com. And that's got all the information on there. But a phone call for a complimentary Get Acquainted session is the way that most clients and I connect.
Okay. Well, thank you for offering that, because in today's world of everything's digital, you're the first person I've ever had that say, call me. What a novel concept.
Well, it is a collaboration. We're going to work together
It
to
is.
do something. And I can get a feel for them, and they can get a feel for me. I love to talk to people. I'm naturally curious. And as you can probably tell, I'm very passionate about what it is that I want to do with owners. And that's usually the first step.
Okay. Well, let's definitely get you back on, get you rescheduled for another appearance here. And I think we've barely scratched the surface on this topic. There's
Great. I would love to. Thank you very much. It's one of those, you've been a great host. Thank you for making me feel welcome.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for being with us. And we're going to say that's a wrap for this episode of the Profitable Home Services Podcast. Remember, it's not how much money you make, it's how much money you keep. That's the important part. And if you'd like to grab your free digital copy of my book, Your Path to Profits, you can see it right there behind my head. All you have to do is go out to yourprofitsbook.com and go ahead and get your free digital copy. I'm also offering, I'm going to use the word upsell, but it's for free, a free paperback copy that I'll be happy to autograph and send as well. So thank you again. And we're going to call that a wrap for this episode.
Thanks, Diane.